Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, 5 innovative asset management use cases. Excited to be here and have everybody join us on the call, and we're going to get ourselves going. So a little bit about this webinar. Yes, we are recording. We will be shipping out the recording as fast as possible. You could expect it by the end of this week. Not maybe as soon as today, but definitely by the end of the week. And it's definitely a live Q&A. We love to hear feedback. We love questions. So if you're new to Zoom, welcome to the world, and use the Q&A button down below. Feel free to use the chat as well, but Q&A is much easier for us to manage and get to the questions, and we'll leave time at the end for questions. So bring them up along the way. If we can answer them while we're talking, we will. Otherwise, we'll hold them to the end and go from there. Okay, so I'd like to introduce who's going to be walking you through the discussion today. So I'm Thad West, CEO at ISOS Technology. I will be your moderator. But joining me on this call, we have a few great experts. I'd like to introduce Kathy Davey. Kathy is a principal solutions engineer at Atlassian, and she's in enterprise service management at Atlassian. She has 20 years in IT operations and service management, including time at Axios Systems, BMC, Splunk, and Sun Microsystems. Kathy focuses on helping customers unite every team on a single platform to democratize service delivery, resolve issues faster, and deliver amazing service experiences. Kathy, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Ed. Nice to be here.
Excellent, thank you. Nick Sommerfeld is an expert Atlassian consultant on the professional services team here at ISOS Technology. With a decade of experience in the Atlassian ecosystem and a background in agile product and project management, Nick designs and delivers custom solutions for technical and business teams across mid-size enterprise organizations. He focuses on bringing long-term value to clients and partnering with them to achieve their strategic goals through creative solutioning, process improvement, data analysis, and improved customer experiences. Nick is a speaker and a thought leader who has presented at digital and in-person Atlassian events, and frequently participates in ISOS webinars and local Atlassian community events in Florida. When he's not working, you can find him on the beach with his dog, Bailey. Nick, welcome.
Hey, Thad. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's get started here. And so let's kick it off a little bit with what in the world is Insight? What the heck is Insight? Kathy, can you, being the Atlassian expert, can you give us the pitch?
Sure. So it's essentially a database of anything you want. So if you think of traditional CMDBs, ours is an XMDB, meaning it's not just your configuration items. It's not just your IT assets, the physical assets, the logical ones, and also your people, right? Users, employees, customers, really anything you want to manage and leverage relationships between that will help drive your workflow. All of that can be stored in Insight.
I love that. One of the little things I hear is that Insight's actually changing its name too. Talk us through that a little bit.
That's right. Any day now, we will be changing the name from Insight to Assets. So you'll still catch me calling it Insight, but over the next month or so, all the documentation, all the in-product screens will change to Assets.
Excellent. Well, you heard it here first. Thanks, Kathy. Nick, you're out working with customers every day with this stuff. Why are you excited about it in the real world?
Yeah, I mean, and it's to Kathy's point that it's not just a database for things like hardware or software. It can be for everything. So we're using it for just that. And coincidentally, that's what we're here to talk about. But that's the most exciting thing, is you can use it for any conditional data that you'd like.
Yeah, love it. And we'll walk through some of the use cases and really what that means and kind of unpeel that onion for folks. But I think you both have said it, and it's one of the things that really stands out for me is that assets, when people hear asset management, they just think of things, they think of physical things. But as both of you said, it could be anything and everything. Anything you want to model, you can model in this model. And I love that XMDB concept. I think that's fantastic. We do have a little quiz. So just a little quiz for our audience that we're going to pull up. So you should see it. Which of the following types of data, just based on hearing us talk, can be configured as assets. So fill them out, and let's talk about the results as they come in. I'm going to take the quiz. Oh, host and panelists can't vote. Darn it. I guess we can't skew the results. But we'll just give you 5-10 seconds, 15 seconds, no pressure, to fill that out. I know Marianne's watching the results as they're coming in. Results are audited by Marianne. There we go. Servers 100%, applications 96. So we kind of go in descending orders there. And this was the trick question. The answer is all of the above. We can model all of the things above as assets within Insight, and more. And again, we'll talk through some of that in the use case, but that's the real power of this stuff when you start to think about it. Is it's anything that you want to perform actions on within Jira, you can model those things that you're performing actions on within Insight. So without actually, sorry, I want to get we've kind of set the stage what it is, what can be put in there. Nick, how do people get access to it?
Yeah, so one of the exciting things that we see with our clients is most of them already have Insight, and you might as well. If you're on cloud and you have JSM Premium, you've got it. If you're in data center and you have JSM, you've got it as well. It's there. So if it's available to you, it's definitely something worth using. And it's not new, so it's been around, in different forms since 2013. Atlassian acquired it, and it's since 2020. So it's been around, it's been used, and now that it is part of the Atlassian ecosystem, constant changes, constant iterations and updates. So all good things on that front.
Good, I love it. All right, well, that's enough of what it is, how you get access to it. Let's just jump right into it and how people are actually using it, and some of the things that we see. So one of our first use cases that we see and we talk about is leverage all people related data, employee data. And it's really kind of that first use case a lot of people jump into is they want richer, more interesting modeled relationships of people other than just Jira users and reporters and assignees. And Kathy, I think you set up a nice demo for this. I think kind of talk us through it.
Sure. Yeah. As you said, it's the most common use case, right? So everybody goes to the physical assets, but then the next question is who owns them, right? Who's asking for those assets? So how do I start relating that data in? And so I have a really quick demo here. Actually, I think it's the longest demo here, but a few minutes to showcase an onboarding use case where people, hopefully your most valuable asset, are going to be highlighted as the main Insight object. And we'll see how all its related data, so locations, your manager, your role, how all of those relationships can dynamically drive the activity that happens. So.
Let's kick it off.
Now, onboarding is a great example of needing to orchestrate a flurry of activities across multiple teams and systems. Let's pretend that we have a new user starting soon, Allison Cook. She'll start in a few weeks. As I pick her region, the next question on her office will automatically filter based on that selection. In EMEA, you can see North American offices, but in APAC here, you can see a different selection set. The same will happen with department and role. Now, all these fields are completely configurable, with some required and some optional. Some also drive the workflow and activities that we'll see in a minute. For example, we selected an office, which means we'll want facilities to get Allison sorted with one. She'll also need a badge. I also selected sales manager, which means in my organization, she'll get a corporate card, which needs the proper paperwork and background checks. We also selected standard equipment for the role, so we'll want IT to get started on that so everything is ready when she arrives. So back over to the agent portal, we can see that the new onboarding request with all the details we submitted. Over here on the right, we have a new person object for Allison. The system automatically created her with all the details. Here we also see it suggesting a laptop model. This is surfaced because of the role she's in. We can also see that based on the sales manager role, she has some different access policies. Now, as an HR agent, I probably don't really care about that, but IT certainly would. This information is all going to be passed over to them. And that's what we see here. Notice we also have a linked facilities request for the office, which requires approval. That's been sent to the proper facilities team to handle. Let's drill into the IT support ticket that has her MacBook and cloud entitlements based on her role. Here we can see that laptop model, entitlements already populated. The IT agent can certainly add or update this as needed. Maybe we provide a magic keyboard or other accessory to help get her started. It will be linked back to the originating request, and as it progresses, other teams may get involved, such as procurement for that new laptop. Speaking of other teams, notice security has joined the party. We see that the new hire training is required and that credit check and application is also required. All of these teams are coming together, all initiated from that one request, but linked together for visibility and collaboration. Now, for the sake of the demo, we're going to pretend all the necessary steps were taken so we can push ahead to final review. You can set up dependencies to help drive your processes and follow your various procedures. As you step through, it can also update the data here within Jira Service Management or to external systems as well. Now, if we look at Allison, we can see that she's been activated, no longer in onboarding, and we can see all the various relationships and connections she has to the business, including, look at that, a new laptop, which is on order. I can even get to that IT support ticket from here.
There is so much happening in there. I hope everybody that's on the webinar can appreciate all of the detail that was in there, because it was so much automation was kicked off, so much logic behind the fields and how other tickets get spawned. I mean, is that so, Kathy? Talk me a little bit through that use case a little bit. Is that is that one that you've seen around Atlassian? Is that how you guys are starting to think about things?
Yep. So we drink our own champagne, right? And I call that dog fooding, but I prefer to go drink our own champagne. So we use Jira Service Management for our onboarding processes as well, including Confluence pages to have checklists for the individuals to go through. But it is absolutely a common use case. And if you think about it, a lot of that data, IT has a lot of that data, HR has a lot of that data. Now, a lot of it is stored in Active Directory or Okta, and I know, Nick, you've really helped customers leverage that to help drive use cases like this, right?
Right. So when we talk about, an Active Directory and specifically in Jira Cloud, a lot of times, we're hooking up Atlassian Access, but that doesn't really connect the data into Insight. So what we find a lot, what we end up doing a lot for customers is a custom, API-driven connection between their Active Directory and Insight itself. And generally set up maybe a nightly sync between Active Directory and Insight to keep that data up to date and also, make it bi-directional. It's a little complicated and not out of the box by any means, but it's that starting point that I think helps clients get to the video that you just showed, right? Getting the data into Insight is the core of it. And then the use cases just skyrocket from there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You guys also touched on Okta, and I've seen some great providers out there in the marketplace that integrate and feed back into Okta as well. And so it's can you guys kind of talk a little bit about some of the marketplace apps that would help facilitate this as well? Do you guys have some that are kind of top of mind for you guys, or is there how you think about that? Sorry, I kind of threw you for a loop.
Kathy, do you want to take that one?
So there are certainly some marketplace apps. I saw one recently that just came out specific to Insight or soon to be assets. But a lot of times, given the complexity of people's directories, it's really relying on partners like yourselves to come in and help make sense of that data and make sure that they're pulling in the right data. So there's definitely some consultative need there, right? So understanding that it's not just a dumping ground, but really being able to say what piece of information from this directory can start to drive that workflow and really streamline the process, not create a bunch of noise. Because you also have to remember that we want to wrap the automation around it to keep it up to date. So just having that balance.
Right. And as a point, we've done this for, as an example of specific clients. So if you've heard of Lufthansa, or maybe you haven't, they're a massive airline company. But last year we worked with their North American IT team. Insight is now basically the brains of their ITSM process using Jira Service Management, coupled with the Active Directory connection for Insight. Obviously they're using it for things like hardware and software, system access, approvals, things like that. But that's the IT side. They're also, maybe their accounting teams, or not maybe, their accounting teams, their facilities teams, HR team, they're all using that data as well, because you're now creating this repository or database of for all of these different organizations or departments within your organization to come and use the data. So it's all related, it's all combined in Insight. They're spread across multiple locations, so it all brings it together in a nice little place called Insight.
I love it. I love it. We don't have a video on that one. That's correct, right? We're not showing Lufthansa stuff.
No, not on that specifically, but it is very similar to the video. Yeah. Maybe not as complex, but that's the goal. That you want to start. By no means is the video the starting point for your Insight build out and JSM and automation connection. That is the goal. But you can always start small with any of the data that you are putting into Insight relative to people.
I think that's such an important point, Nick, is really like, it's like when people think about, well, we want to do DevOps and we want to do it like Netflix and deploy 3,000 times a day. It's like, okay, well, you're deploying once a quarter now. Like, let's do once a month. Like, let's make some incremental progress here. And I think you can make a lot of incremental progress with Insight. You don't have to go big bang to get a lot of value out of it.
Right. Where we see the Active Directory come into play the best at the beginning is the person, an employee and their manager, right? So in a world where maybe I'm your boss, maybe I get messaged for an approval if you need a new laptop or something like that, right? So we can use just that simple data of who's the employee, who's their manager, and then drive logic in Jira Service Management for things like approvals.
Love it. Love it. Okay. I think we hammered that one. Let's go to our second use case. And Kathy, you touched on it a little bit because your demo showed a unique service portal experience, but I think there's even more to kind of dig in on that. And Nick, I think you've got some stuff that you want to walk us through between various pieces we can put in there. I know we've had instances where we've had people in the portal that we create a brand experience based on customers. Who you are can shape your experience. And so, Nick, maybe you can walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, and the video might make it a little more clear, but consider the concept of clients and different values per client. If I'm, and you'll see this example in the video, but if I'm a client of Amazon and I go to the same portal as a client, as Google as a client, maybe I don't want Google to see Amazon and I don't want Amazon to see Google as a client. So, there's this conditional logic that we can perform based on Insight data. So I think the video might show that a little better.
Check it out.
In this use case, we'll be talking about providing a unique portal experience based on who is visiting the portal. So let's go ahead and create a feature request. A few things to note: the client, products, and features fields that you see are all Insight custom fields based on the client database we've already built in Insight. So as you can see, Amazon is pre-selected because in Insight, I am associated with the client Amazon. Now, when I click on Amazon, I don't see any of the other clients that we've built out in Insight. And because Amazon is already selected, when I go to products, I only see the products that are associated with Amazon. And if I click a product, as an example, AWS, For features, I only see the features that are related to AWS.
Let me get my video back on. That was great. So we're showing it from the portal side, right? We're seeing how we can interact there differently and give the user a different experience. What about on the backside, Kathy? Can you take that data and use it in new and interesting ways?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? So it's not just from the customer perspective, but once those go through and get submitted, right, the SLAs applied, the tasks that get kicked off, all can be based on that customer information. So, I know we treat all of our customers the same or want to give them the most premium experience, but the reality is you probably have some tiers in there, and you might contractually be obligated to different response times, or they might have extra things that you need to do. So the way you deliver that service to them can also be guided and unique based on the information against their profiles.
I love that. It's, when you start to think about profiles from contractual standpoint, but also from, how you think about your customers in different tiers, right? Like, hey, these are our top 3 customers. And if something comes in, we want a 15-minute SLA, not an hour SLA, and just really starting to really shape their experience, either because you have to, because that's the contract you entered, or because you want to, because they're that level of client. I think that's super powerful.
Yeah, the portal that I showed there, and man, I talked really slow on that recording, so sorry. It's pretty simple on the portal, but a lot of the power there is driven after the fact. And the concept is, you can use your IQL to query insight inside of your JQL for an SLA, as an example, right? You just mentioned. So if one client has a 5-hour SLA versus a 10-hour SLA for another, you can directly drive that SLA from your client database that you built in Insight. So a lot that you can do there.
I think you may have just introduced a new term, IQL. So could you just maybe expand on that briefly?
Yeah, so IQL for a short time is going to still be known as Insight Query Language, right? And Kathy, it will soon be Asset Query Language, AQL?
I believe so, yes.
And so, it's a little different from JQL or Jira Query Language. So there is a bit, there's a ton of documentation, easy to pick up, but there is still that learning curve. If you're familiar in learning JQL, probably want to repeat those steps for IQL or AQL coming soon.
So it's a way to kind of search and sift through insight/asset objects while you're doing scripting kind of things, while you're building reports. All of that.
You can use it on filters, right? So again, IQL inside of JQL. You can use it in automation rules. You can use it in Insight itself. It's a way to query objects, but also query the attributes of an object. So you can step through.
Love it.
It really opens all that power. So what people are used to with JQL and being able to get really granular in what you're looking for. And I think one of the questions there was, how do you associate it, right? It's using some of that information and that IQL, even in the field itself, right? To know who's logged in and be able to pull that through. And as Nick said, my example with the SLAs is using that as well. So.
Yeah, and so just to relate it back, we recently did an ITSM build for a rather massive multi-billion-dollar analytics company, a Fortune 500 analytics company, and they had, they provide financial intelligence analytics tools to their clients. They had a very strict business critical need of not showing client A to client B, right? It's not go to the portal and select the client that you are. And it was important for them to select the client that they are because they wanted to drive a lot of this logic, a lot of that, sort of products and features dropdown that you saw in the demo. So, maybe not a use case that you think of right off the bat until you get a business critical requirement. And, with the power, with Insight providing options for you, it's something we were able to offer. And sort of what you saw in the video is a very toned down build of what we did for that client.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, it's out in the wild. It's being used. Yeah, I love those use cases. You know, Kathy, you just reminded me, we've got a few questions coming in. I'm trying to see if there's any that are pertinent that we want to answer in line here, if we want to hold a couple of these to the end. I think one of them that I think is pretty straightforward is associating a Jira user with an Insight person.
Yeah.
Nick,
Yeah. So within Insight, there is a user attribute. And actually, interestingly enough, you know, you can select a Jira user. That's great, right? In the use case of software and hardware, ITSM requests or IT requests, you know, you tie a user to a piece of hardware. In the video you just saw, the way we were able to do that is you actually can tie customers, JSM customers, to an object user attribute as well. So it's not just a dropdown for Jira users, but also a dropdown for customers to your portal. So that's the way we were able to do that.
Love it. And Kathy, I see you're hammering away on a lot of these questions. So keep going. Don't want to lose any of that momentum. We'll jump into our next use case though. And again, we'll get all these questions answered either live or Kathy's going to bloody her fingers doing it. So it'll be good. Okay, use case 3, creating a matrix of features and apps. So Nick, you know, kind of walk us through this here. I know that you have customer experience, you know, talk us through this a little bit. What the heck are we even talking about here?
Yeah, so we've actually been building on the use cases as we go through these videos. They kind of play off of each other a little bit, and this one does as well. So if you think about what we just saw in that video, clients, products, features, that's already 3 layers deep on a conditional basis. And natively within Jira, you can do a cascading select list, right? But that's 2 layers deep, and you can't conditionally hide options for, you know, based on who's visiting the portal. You know, so if you ever need to go more than 2 layers deep, as an example, building a matrix of, you know, features and apps and maybe other things, Insight is going to be the best way to do it. You could do it with some overly complicated and convoluted automation for Jira rule, but it would take you way too long to manage, or take too much time to manage moving forward. But conceptually, if you think of it from the Atlassian side, start at your product level. You've got Jira. Then you want to go down to apps, and maybe automation for Jira is an app that you choose right after you select Jira, because you wouldn't be shown automation for Jira for Confluence, or at least maybe not a year ago. And then, you know, maybe that gives you the ability to select for a feature request, a new trigger. And so we're 3 layers deep in a way that you have not been able to do in Jira before, at least easily.
Yeah, love it. Kathy, take us a little bit to the process. So talk us through it a little bit.
Yeah, so well, you mentioned process, right? So if you think about that process and just the steps that need to be taken, those 2 can benefit from the layers that we're talking about, right? So if you take change, for example, depending on the risk levels, you probably have different approval requirements or extra testing tasks that need to be done. We have lead time requirements, for example. And instead of having to remember all of that, or having people to go, you know, consult policies and what rule am I supposed to follow for this? You know, all that data, those rules can actually be assets. So that's what we're going to see in this next video, how you can use questions to actually drive what happens to the team and push them through that workflow.
Love it.
This is an example of using our Asset XMDB to drive standards and policies. A bit more involved than a pre-approved change, as you'd expect. We'll do an upgrade, where we can add the service in which application they're changing. The options here are coming from the application schema. Now this is going to drive approvals on the backend. We'll add a date, and now you can see some questions that we'll use to drive the risk calculator that is being driven off of the practice standard schema. These are insight fields, and as you can see, we've added visual cues to help guide users on the right path, right? You don't want them doing it during business hours, so actually being able to use Insight to provide more context for them. This is configurable. We've kept it to 3 simple questions, and the answers submitted will take into account the service tier and provide a risk score. If we give it a refresh, we can see that information here, as well as provide information using our knowledge base to explain what's happening. To look behind the curtain, here you can see the objects for each of those questions, with the options we saw in the dropdowns, along with those visual cues and a score value. The risk score object shows the upper and lower limits that drive those bands. And then to calculate it, it's a simple automation rule pulling in all of these values. Much more manageable here in Insight than in the weeds over there.
That is fantastic. So Kathy, tell me, is that, I know some of the stuff we're looking at is Atlassian uses, is this one of the kind of behind the firewalls things that Atlassian uses?
This one actually came from a customer example. So we have a very large media company that was looking into how they could start to automate a lot of their changes. Actually do this really cool one with standard changes where, you know, it's a pre-approved change, right? Why do I need to fill out all of the details of what the backup plans are and the test plans? That's, you know, part of our policies and procedures. So when they select the applicable pre-approved change, it actually fills in all of that information, pulling that content from Insight. So that one's directly from the field with some of our customers.
I love that. And it's, you know, I can remember way back, if you're old enough, you can remember having to fill out a piece of paper, right? And getting all the signatures and pre-approved changes, you needed less signatures. And then getting it into something like doing change management and Jira software management was great, but you still kind of had that process. And now you guys are just taking it to the next level of like, look, if we all agree that this is the policy, let's not have any intermediate steps and get us going. I think that's so powerful.
Exactly. That's that high velocity, right? Making sure that we're streamlining change. And that's the newness of it, right? Where you had really heavy policies and procedures. I remember walking into customers and they had, you know, a whiteboard full of process maps. And then when you dug down, like, do you really do all of these steps? You know, why are we doing that? Can we automate that? And Insight, you know, having the ability to store all of that really just streamlines it all and creates lots of efficiency opportunity.
I think the one thing you said there that just kind of makes me chuckle is, you know, asking them, you know, do you really do all these, but do you know why you do all these, right? And like a lot of times it's like, well, I got here and the person that described this process left, and it's like, oh my goodness, what a nightmare. Nick, what are you doing out in the real world?
Yeah, so very similar to this. So over the last year, we've actually worked with a client, well known, you know, you may get what I'm going for with this, but this company's been around for over 100 years with thousands of employees spread out across the country. They do like class rings and yearbooks, if you can infer. But we migrated them off a legacy service management tool into JSM. One of the things they wanted to improve upon was their change management or their change enablement process. So a lot of what we saw from Kathy, bits and pieces were implemented for this client as well, along with a little step further where let's take standard changes as an example. Once they're approved and they become standard, we're actually automatically, through automation, building out our Insight library of standard changes. That way, standard changes become objects. And as you go in the future to submit standard changes, you've got your list of pre-approved standard changes that bypass a lot of the processes for normal change management.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, you know, it's funny is one of the great things about being consultants is you get to see how other companies do it across the board, and you realize there's a lot of similar patterns, right? And it's like, look, these are the common concerns. That the nuance might be a little bit different, and that's how we handle it through the, you know, the highly customizable interface of Insight and through JSM. But like generally, it's, hey, we're writing code. There's stuff that we know is okay to deploy, and there's stuff that has much higher risk, and we want to manage how all that stuff gets out in the wild. That's pretty awesome. Let's take it to our next use case. And I saw one of the questions come through about, hey, what kind of reports and all of that. I know we're talking a little bit about enabling company-wide audits and reports, and Kathy, you kind of want to talk us through this. I think this is where you got some expertise.
Yeah, so actually this kind of touches on your comment about the big process and why are we doing this. Oftentimes it's because of compliance, right? There needs to be some kind of audit trail or paper trail. And the next video is where our internal IT team started leveraging Insight to help ensure that auditing and compliance. So, there's certain things that need to happen within a given time frame. And this is just a quick glimpse of how we leverage Insight for that.
This example comes from our internal SaaS management team using Jira Service Management to facilitate their application resiliency policy checks based on service tier. Each quarter, they target different tiers. This is an example of looking at Tier 0 services, where using Insight, it looks up all of those with that value. Not only that, it uses the relationships from those services to pull in all the instances related and tie back. They store this information along with links out to the source and can surface them up through comments or as you see here. For the policy check, these are the individual review requests automatically raised and linked through automation. It also creates the link to the assessment that needs to be completed for auditing purposes. When completed, it stores that against the object along with the date so that we can be sure we're conducting these according to schedule.
So Kathy, in that video, are assessments, the link to the assessment that needs to be completed, what are those? Are those Jira issues? Are they?
Yeah, so it's a combination. So they are Jira issues that have forms associated, and then actually go and create some Confluence pages too for that audit trail. So it does create the documentation assets for them to track. And then when the auditors come, right, they have all of that paperwork ready, using the SLAs to make sure that it all happened in time. And then I think I mentioned in the video, the scheduled trigger for those, right? So somebody doesn't actually have to come in and push that audit. It has refresh dates and it knows, this tier needs to happen every quarter, or this one every 6 months, and will kind of put that on their plate, right? To proactively come at it rather than scrambling behind, when that date's approaching.
Yeah. And so it's end to end. You are, you have that full visibility, not just through Jira, not just through Insight, but also back into Confluence too. And you have that, that full traceability, which is important.
Exactly, pulling that all together in the object itself so that you have those links and it'll take you in context to the right place. And I know there was a question on analytics or reporting. So Atlassian Analytics does now support Insight objects. That I believe is going GA later this year, but it is available if you're not using it today. That's Atlassian Analytics. And then there's also some really great add-ons right now that will let you access the Insight data as well.
That's all. I don't know if you guys can hear. I've got construction happening back here. This is no hammering for you. Okay. I think that's great. I think there was another question in there, Kathy. You were talking about, and Nick, maybe you can weigh on this a little bit too, is it said, hey, can you put tempo objects into Insight? I think, can you have tempo attributes inside objects? So I don't know if we know the answer to that one specifically off the cuff, but there is this push for Insight to integrate with other apps and other features across the Atlassian suite. Is that a fair statement? Yeah.
So right now, when you create attributes, I think there are 4 types, which are other objects. They could be, the default, which has a list of 10 or 12 different things. Some of those include URLs. So we're seeing a lot of people leverage that to point out to other systems. For example, like data source systems, right? You've got your discovery tools that are out there that are gathering everything that's got, that's chatty on your network and pulls that in. You don't want to really bring all of that data in. So we'll see a lot of the URLs pointing out. I don't know specifically about any tempo projects for having a default kind of attribute type, but given the flexibility that's there, right, even using just kind of text fields that could point out, and then of course the URL that I just mentioned, I'm sure you can, you can get something working there. And then we've got the API as well that brings in a lot of data. I know Nick has a lot of experience on that side.
Yeah, I mean, specifically about Tempo, accounts as a field in Jira provided by Tempo is something that you can, through automation for Jira or a scripting add-on tool, start to marry that data together, right? I think natively might be a little tricky, but there's not much we haven't seen that we're able to do with a combination of automation, insight, and maybe a third-party app. But to elaborate a little bit on this audit and report. So earlier this year, I worked with a company, a big investment management firm, and I'll give you some of the details to sort of make the case. So they manage something like $100 billion in assets, and they're a subsidiary of one of the world's largest publicly traded financial firms. And I say that because they take compliance and audits very seriously in that space. So what we actually ended up doing was building out, there was already an insight database built out of all of the SaaS tools that they offered. But per regulatory standards, they needed to perform quarterly or annual audits on user access to all of those tools. So in combination with automation for Jira and Insight, we spin up through triggers, so like a cron job scheduler trigger, 20 to 25 different tickets a quarter that are assigned to system owners or tool owners in Insight. And then they go through a very similar process to what we saw in the video, where they do this whole, system access audit per SaaS tool that a ticket gets created for. So you can create tickets based off objects. It's a great combination for audits.
Yeah, I love that. It's just, I think one of the things you're always trying to do is make the auditors go away with as little work as possible. So if you can do all that work up front, get it modeled, get your processes in there, when auditors show up, it's an easy audit to have. So I like that a lot. Let's flip to our final use case. And it's really kind of how we started this webinar. So it's a good use case to end on, but it's basically turn any data you have into assets. And, this is where it was kind of a challenge to our panelists to say, well, come up with something interesting to show you guys. And Kathy, I think you're gonna show us more inner workings from Atlassian, if I'm not mistaken. But
that's right. So this was my personal favorite since I helped implement it here at Atlassian. It's something our team uses to help guide our enablement for the solution engineers. So for those out there who are using spreadsheets, hopefully you pay attention and are excited by what we're about to see.
Our JSM portal provides a user-friendly experience, allowing new SEs to easily enroll. We leverage our knowledge base to guide them, and then provide simple drop-down scoring options across different skill areas. In this example, our core products. Once they complete their baseline assessment, they'll receive an email welcoming them aboard and providing their target scores for their given role, along with potential buddies who have been verified and can help accelerate their learning. Skip ahead 90 days, automation will let the SE know when it's time to update their skills. A similar form allows them to update the new values and signal their interest in being a coach. Just like before, they'll get that immediate feedback of where they are relative to their role goals. From a management perspective, these assessments are being added as issues, meaning you'll not only have current state, but history of their progression. Queues provide easy viewing of the team and can easily filter based on selections such as region or manager. And of course, dashboards provide that executive view to see where knowledge gaps are and can be sliced up in many ways. All of this is powered by Insight, meaning it's super flexible to adapt to different teams' needs and update quickly.
That's fantastic. So it all starts with a self-scoring. How do I view myself here? And then as you're going through your progress, if I get this right, your teammates will either confirm or deny kind of where you're at and say, yeah, we think you're progressing to the next level. Is that kind of how
so we don't have that part, right? So right now it's really self-managed. So it's more from a, so you're self-verifying. And essentially it's meant to be a way to help you score. So we just had a influx of new SEs who come on, and you're able to select your role. And then it gives them, hey, in 12 months, these are about where you should feel comfortable, right? Here, based on your role, the scores for each of the skills that we have in our matrix. So it's really meant to help guide them. There are future plans on how do we get them verified so that we can start pairing up buddies automatically, like mentioned there. And then also, right, we've got a webinar coming up who can speak on this particular topic. So lots of opportunity for expanding the use case there once you have this information. So like I said, very excited about that one. That's kind of one of my personal favorites.
I think that's great. You could even, start thinking about modeling learning opportunities, like, hey, get this industry certification kind of thing. And how, kind of putting some of those things in there just to help kind of gauge and monitor where you're at from a learning perspective and help put you on a right path.
Yeah, that somebody brought that up pretty early on was, when we had this spreadsheet of who came up with the skills, right? Who said these were the things that we needed. And now that we actually have a way to capture this, we can compare them against, the success metrics in our roles. And do you actually need these skills for that role? Or, as new headcount comes on, what's the kind of profile, what skill gaps are you trying to fill? So again, lots of opportunity there, and so much that you can do now that, you have that data at hand and can start relating it to other things, across the platform.
Love it. Love it. All right, Nick, what use case did you pick? I kind of know what you picked because it's a pretty neat one. But why don't you share it?
Yeah, so to lean heavy into the assets can be anything, or insight can be used for anything. We have CBS Marketing as a client of ours. That's probably well known. But think about them, right? They're a major media company. They do shows. They do commercials for these shows for all of their properties. So let's think Survivor, right? But as a show, it has seasons, it has episodes, it has all of these digital assets, these design assets or art or music or announcers that you hear. All of these things roll up to a show. And so they naturally had this database, like several databases throughout their department that house this stuff. We've recently combined all of that into Insight. That way, as they build these commercials, so if you've ever seen a commercial over the last few years for any CBS property, Survivor, that process runs through Jira for them to put those commercials together. So we're tracking all of that data inside Jira. So it's pretty cool.
I mean, when you think about it, it's like that's a revenue stream, right? This is not a kind of nice to have. This is what keeps the lights on, pays the bills, and all that. And putting all of that in there, I remember, when you were telling me about it, that even the process of creating an ad, right? Which is there's the whole ideation phase all the way to, how do we actually get it produced? What music are we going to license? And then what airtime are we going to slot it into? Like when you start to think about all of the things that have to happen to put that ad in front of you that as a consumer, you're like, oh man, I got to watch an ad. But but they put them out there. And it's quite a feat to actually think about that across all their affiliates. And it's crazy to me.
Right. It's the quintessential non-IT ESM use of Jira, JSM, Insight. It's not IT. It's very far from IT. So it's great.
Yeah. No, I think I love that. I love that. I want to, before we get to our questions, and I know you guys have been answering them online, so thank you so much for doing that. Let's do just a quick lightning round. We're going to do a couple of topics here in our lightning round, just real quick. First, key takeaways. What's one idea, concept, practical piece of knowledge that you want our audience to take away from today? Nick, lead us off.
Yeah, so I'm going to pose it as a question, right? So have you been wanting to present a more conditional or dynamic relationship-based portal experience to your customers, right? Answer is probably yes. And that's what Insight can help you do.
I would almost ask another question like that. Do you have thousands of custom fields in Jira? Because you're probably trying to get the same behavior by doing custom fields, and it's just going to fall apart. So
to that point, real quick, Insight with CBS as an example, before Insight is what it is and was available to its extent that it is now, we've redone stuff in Insight that we didn't use Insight for previously because it wasn't what it is now. And so we had all of those custom fields, we had all of those artifacts that we've now used Insight for.
love it, love it. Kathy, what's your key takeaway?
So I'd say to focus on the use case. We've kind of touched upon this, right? It is a database for anything. It's that XMDB, but be discriminating with what you're putting in there, right? Ask the question, does that object, does that attribute, does that drive workflow or some kind of action? And if not, why are you putting in there, right? Why are you tracking it? And there's a real balance there. So it is super powerful, but don't dig into a hole, right? I think that's traditionally, right, where people fell down on CMDBs is that, oh, I'm going to go get all this data, and really need to take a step back, focus on the use case. What value are you trying to bring? And again, just keep that balance in mind.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to play as well. My tip is, it's kind of along the same lines of both of you. It's, just if you already own Insight / new assets, like just start playing around with it, start using it. And you've seen some really powerful things in here that Kathy and Nick have put together, but don't get intimidated by like, oh my gosh, I got to build all of this. Like, start small, and have a little bit of success, get comfortable with it, and start to lean into it, and start chunking away at it would be my key takeaway.
Yeah, just to add on that,
yes,
look at spreadsheets, right? So look in your organization, where do I have a bunch of spreadsheets that you want to get rid of, right? People love their Google Sheets. That's a really easy way to start looking for those incremental wins that you're talking about. Yeah.
Love it, love it. Okay, and we kind of touched on this too, but just real quick, last lightning round question: getting started. How do you recommend people get started, or what is a pitfall to avoid? Kathy, I think you already kind of touched on it, but I don't know if you want to build on that or have a different perspective.
Yeah, I think I'll reiterate that. So, and your point of start small, right? So explore, it's super powerful, but don't be intimidated. There's just a lot that it can do, and build upon it. You don't have to do everything out of the gate. You heard even us, right? The skills matrix that we just saw. There's so many paths that we want to go through, but we get there's other projects, other things to do. So start small, build those wins, and have those lessons learned as you approach things, because as Nick said, you might want to go back and iterate on them.
Love it. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, to keep that going, it's find one team, right? One area, one set of data that exists in the ether within your organization, and bring it into Insight. See how you can build it out. You don't have to use it, right? You don't have to make it a part of Insight custom fields or a part of a project, a part of a portal. Just get it in Insight and see how everything starts to relate to each other, or how you can relate things to each other. Just see what it looks like.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. I'll play too, but mine is just reiterating, and I'll just liken it back to, if there's Jira admins on this call, or you've ever built a workflow and you've seen a 32-step workflow, and it's basically you're trying to define somebody's job through a workflow. It's like timeout. And I'd reflect back to what Kathy said, which is, if you don't need that data, don't put it in there. If you don't need that workflow step, don't put it in there. Just keep it simple. And yeah, start small. So with that, I want to go real quick on a couple of pieces, how you can reach out to us today. So we have a great white paper, The Impact of Digital Transformation on Asset and Configuration Management. So we talk about a lot of the topics we talked on today. We'll put that link in the chat. Definitely feel free to download that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us as well. So it's, isostech.com/contact, and happy to jump on a call with anybody and answer questions, and be a resource for you guys out there. We've got 5 minutes left, 4 minutes, and let's do a little bit of Q&A. And so, Kathy, I know you've been monitoring this Q&A pretty intently. Is there a question that you want to dive in on first?
So I think some of them refer to futures, so and what's coming. So maybe I'll answer a few with a couple of comments here.
Yes,
we already covered that we're renaming it to assets. We recently rolled out the ability to leverage those insight assets field on Jira software, Jira Work Management. So while they can't access insight directly, so they're not going to manage the objects or anything like that, they can surface them on their screens. They can select the options so that it's across the platform. So that recently rolled out. There's a question on that. Improvements on the UI. So you might have already seen some of those, but the improvements on editing, on importing, there's a search that goes across that. QR support when you are trying to add those objects into a field, all of those scans needing to populate that, all of that has come. We're always working on scale and performance. And the big one I'm anxiously awaiting for that I saw somebody asked was, when will the forms, the Performa acquisition that we made, support the asset field? And that's coming soon. So I'm with you all there. Can't wait for that one to happen. And then for more detail, if you go to atlassian.com/roadmap, there's a lot more information there. I think
I think there's one little tag along to that, the parity from between data center and cloud, and kind of closing that gap a little bit.
Correct. Yeah. So we recognize things like connectors. I saw somebody ask about SCCM. We're working on really focusing on Forge to open up the door so that we can start having a lot of those vendor integrations come through quicker, easier for our customers. So that is in the works. And then I think the other one was on the IQL, JQL. Absolutely, we're looking at improvements on that. And then any other gaps from the data center side. Somebody mentioned reporting there earlier. We are addressing that with Atlassian Analytics. There's also some different apps that are out there that can help fill those gaps. But yes, we are absolutely working on it. As a cloud first company, we are continuing to roll out things for Jira Service Management Cloud, and lots of activity in the next few quarters here.
Nick, last question for you. And thank you, by the way. Sorry. Last question for you, Nick. In your video, the question is about, hey, that's great. You logged into my portal and we can filter it. What happens if we allow anonymous access? How do we kind of shield those anonymous people from the stuff we don't want them to see? Can we do that?
Yeah, so we actually went through this process with the client that I was talking about, and we decided to pull back a little bit from it. The portal right now does not give you the experience to conditionalize request types, right? In cloud. In on-prem, there are apps that provide functionality to hide request types. Cloud, you can't right now. So it does make it a little tricky when the form itself, if field is required, to make it dependent on a customer existing in Insight. So we actually pulled back from that, but the solution was going to be to create that single request type that was mentioned in the question, something like a request access that wasn't based on any sort of client field or product field. So, one request type that could be submitted by anonymous users, the rest would not be able to, but everyone sees all of the request types because that's just how cloud works right now.
Got it. I see one more question coming in, but I think we're going to have to end it here. We will be taking those questions, kind of wrapping this up in a blog, also sharing out the video. A big thank you to our panelists and all their expertise. And also thank you for all the great demo videos. And it really kind of hammers the point home to see this stuff live. So much appreciated. I think everybody on the call appreciated it as well. And have a good day, and hope to see everybody soon.